Right, so this is the final challenge of the Programming Essentials Basics course. We're going to make a username and password entry system, and we're going to keep them entering usernames and passwords until they either get them both correct and then they can log in, or they enter it too many times. If they enter it too many times, they get too many failed attempts and they lock their account and they can't do anymore. So this uses a lot of the skills that we've learnt. I've done a bit of work to begin with, and I'll explain what's happened. So I'm just going to print a little bit of text here to say logging in, and then I've set attempts to 3, so we know how many attempts we've got to begin with. And I've set a username and password in the system so that we have something to compare them against. Then I've set the username and password to be blank. Now, this is a similar reason why we did it in the past, in that we need to define the variables before we make the loop so that we can test the loop. But we'll do that in a sec. And then we need to enter a username and password from the user. So this is skills that we've already learnt, and when we run the program we can type something in. But we want to extend this now to keep going until we've either had too many attempts or we get in. And if we have too many attempts, we want to disable access or lock the account. Right, so let's try and get this working. So I'm going to introduce an extra concept here, and it's very useful if you want to do this sort of thing. So I'm going to say while true. Now, while true is a line of code which creates a loop that just continually loops until we can use what's called a break command to break out of this loop. So let's demonstrate what that means. So in actual fact, what we've done is create an infinite loop. Yeah, we're just continually looping around these two input commands for a long time. If we want to break out of that, we could, as I said, use the break command. So if we only want to do it once, we hit a break and it will stop the program executing. So let's try that. So let's do a Q and a Q. Okay, we've broken, we've stopped now. Even though we're in this true, this break comes out of this loop and stops. Very, very useful, especially for this scenario. So once we have input the username and password, we want to test them. So let's just drop down here and say if the username that we have in the system is equal to the username that they have entered. Yeah. Now this is a test, but it's not the final test, because we want to test this, and they must also enter their password correct. Both of the username and password should be correct before we can get in. Now, here and this need to match these two before we can do so. Here and. Now this is a very important skill to learn. So we're saying if this is true and the following statement is true, and let's do it the same way around as we did the other one. So do that. Okay, let's just drop the text size down a little bit so you can see all of this. Does that fit? Nearly. Let's just do this a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So these two things have to be true for us to get access granted and break out. So print. Right. And then break. So we know what break does. It will break out of any loop that we're in. So let's try this. So let's do Q, S and then S. Okay, we're back into the loop again. Why? Because both have to be true for us to print access granted and break. Otherwise, the loop will continue going around this block. But if we were to type in Pluto and Daffy123 and press enter, this fires, so both of these things are true, therefore it goes into here. So let's just experiment with that. Let's say you get your username correct, yeah, but you don't get the password correct. Back around again. Let's say you get your password correct and you miss your username, or your password, sorry, by the case Daffy123. a lowercase d, again, we're back around, we're looping around and around. So you have to get them both correct. Right, the additional thing now is to make sure that we have enough attempts. So, else. So, as you remember from the earlier video lessons, that if this if statement is not true, and by this one it's actually both parts of this if statement are not true, then the else will happen. Yeah. Now, currently we just loop back round, but we're going to do something here. We're going to say print a nice message, so incorrect. Something like that. Yeah. Let's just run this. Okay, so let's get it wrong. Access denied, but we've come back around. Now, we've got this attempts variable. So let's print out how many attempts they have left. And I guess what we can do here is actually take one away from attempts. There we go. Print you have attempts tries left. Okay, let's run that. Try something. Okay, you have 2 tries left. You have 1 tries left. You can fix this later if you want. I'm not going to for the purpose of today. And then you have 0 tries left. Now, at this point, we need to do something. So we need to add an additional if statement inside here to break out and lock the account if they've tried too many times. So if attempts is less than 1, I think, let's try that, then print account locked, and then we want to break. Right, let's run this. Okay, let's get it wrong loads of times and see if we break out. Okay, so we tried 1, there was 2 left. We tried 2, there was 1 left. We tried that one. Okay, we had 1 try left at this point, and then we've got 0 tries left. Account locked, break. Let's test again, maybe getting it right. So let's get it wrong. Let's get it wrong a few times. Okay, we've got 1 last try. Let's make sure we type it right. Pluto and Daffy. 1, 2, 3. Okay, access granted. On the last try, we got in. Okay, so the concepts that we've done today with this particular lesson are and. So both of these things have to be true, both of these conditions, before this lines of code work. Otherwise we go down to here. So we could get this right, we could get this right, but on their own, but that would be going into this section. But if we get them both right at the same time, that's the only time we get access granted. And also we've covered breaking, which will break out of the current loop that we're in. Whatever loop that is, it will break out of that loop and come out of it. So it will go here, and then the program will stop running because there are no more lines of code. Okay, so that's the final challenge of the basics, sort of introductory programming lessons for your GCSEs.